2021 board meeting for Ignite CDA, Coeur d'Alene's Urban Renewal Agency. If you would all stand, remove your hats, please, and help me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Up first is public comment. Do we have any public comment? Please come forward. Seeing none, we have some action with the consent agenda.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Again, this is approval of last month's board meetings, the payables, and the monthly financial statements. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask whose idea was it to put on the consent calendar? Because that was a terrific idea. Was it Tony's?
We kind of talked about it, but I never got any traction.
It's a great idea.
Yeah.
Mick is really relieved, so I just
Oh, yeah.
want to commend whoever made that idea.
Yep.
Next up, the La Crosse Avenue Extension Project update. Matt?
Whoops, am I fighting with somebody?
It's magic.
Oh, come on. No, we're not trying to share, are we?
Yeah.
Oh, we are, okay. Okay, there we go. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Matt Gillis, for those of you who don't know me, with Welch Comer Engineers, and I'm here to just give you a quick update on the La Crosse Avenue project, as you are the primary funder of it. Feel free to stop me at any point. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I should be, 7 or 8 minutes, and then you can move on. So before I get into where we're currently at with the project, I wanted to take a step back. This group, I don't know if it was all these individuals, but went through the process of the Four Corners BLM master planning process with Phil and Miller Stauffer, put a lot of work, a lot of time into a really good plan. And so portions of that plan that we're going to talk about is the very north end of the planning area, where it's a little blurry. I apologize because I pulled it right from the document. But some of the elements that you approved in this plan were some soccer fields, micro soccer fields that maybe could be converted into a larger field, restroom and shelter area, a fairly large parking area, the connection of La Crosse, because right off the screen here is Northwest Boulevard that runs this way. So on this particular sheet, north is kind of up and to the left. I should have mentioned that first. Access, for public access to the waterfront, pickleball courts, then a realigned Centennial Trail as it meanders through the park area, a pretty elaborate shelter, similar to what's in McEwen Park, a demonstration water quality project for stormwater was part of the plan, and then finally a cyclocross track. This particular project, though, is from this dashed yellow line to the left or to the northwest. The rest of this is in a subsequent phase as funding is available. So we're going to focus this project on just the stuff that's to the left of the dashed line. So our project we're in preliminary design right now. The plans are currently under review. We've got 4 or 5 primary elements that I think will make sense to you. One is La Crosse itself, okay? And this is part of our base bid. In other words, this is like, if we're gonna award anything, we've got to award that. And so La Crosse is a 2-lane roadway, shared use asphalt path on the, say, the south or west side, a 5-foot concrete sidewalk on the other side of the roadway. There's 16 straight-in parking stalls up on La Crosse. And I say up because La Crosse will be slightly elevated to everything we're doing down below between the roadway and the Centennial Trail, just because of grades. And then what's slightly different from the master plan is La Crosse was going to come down and just feed the parking lot. Now we have the opportunity, 6 years later, things have happened to create some connectivity and traffic circulation. So that's the roadway portion of it. The other part of the base bid is that parking lot I mentioned. This is an 80-stall parking lot. We worked pretty closely with Bill Greenwood on the number of stalls that he may think he needs for all the amenities down here. So these two items are the base bid. We really want to award both of these. Add alternates now, which is you all know what add alternates are, but it just gives us the opportunity to efficiently expend the funding that's available. The first add alternate is not completed soccer fields. In this case, funding it will only allow for us to essentially get the pads. So we'll grade them, it'll be a flat surface, we'll spray it with some dryland seed, and then it's ready to go for a later phase. That's add alt 1. The second add alternate, which is in the master plan, was a CXT type building. I think it was 4-stall bathroom that will serve this area with stairs down to the Centennial Trail and some extra hardscape there to accompany the parking area. And then the third and final add alternate, like the soccer field, is to prepare the pickleball courts for future finishing. So we'd get the natural ground to a pad level. It'd be all level and seated just to stabilize it. So BLM was a big part of the original master plan. A lot of this is their property, so we need to honor their desires. And so we took a close look to make sure, at the beginning of this, are we at least honoring the spirit of the master plan? And we think we are. We've got all the amenities. We have the roadway, the future soccer fields, the pickleball courts, and the parking area and bathroom. To verify that, we sat down, video chatted with staff from BLM and laid out everything, just like I'm doing now, just to make sure that they understood the project and were supportive of the project, and they are. I think there's one small issue. We're trading information back and forth, and that just has to do with utilities crossing the BLM corridor. But if we've approved the bathroom here, we have to service the bathroom, and to do that, we need to get utilities across. So I think we're going to be fine there. As part of our roadway project, we have a lot of material to get rid of. Just the way that the grades work, since we're trying to tie the roadway La Crosse with Bellarive with a parking area, there's fire truck requirements and grade requirements that we have to adhere to. So it's creating some excavation on the project, which is normal, but it's a fair amount, and so we have a few options on how we deal with that. One, the most expensive option, is we could excavate it and haul it off site. That's pretty expensive. Two, we could excavate it and then spread it around here in some strategic manner, not in giant piles, in preparation for future park expansion. That's also expensive. Or we could coordinate with the adjacent property owner. In this case is Active West. So I sat down with Dennis Cunningham from Active West and talked about a mutually beneficial agreement here, because if you've been out there, most of this property is pretty low. It's in a big hole, a bit of a ravine. And if this is ever marketable, there's a substantial amount of material that needs to be brought in to make it work. And so there's an agreement that we're working on right now. We've passed it back and forth a few times, but currently what it says in general terms is we have about 5,500 yards of material that we need to get rid of somehow, some way. His site needs 6,000 or 6,500 yards of material. And so instead of us paying to excavate it and get rid of it somehow, the agreement says that Active West will pay our entire excavation for the roadway, right? And they will also pay for the material that they're taking. So it's, the way I like to think about it is Active West is going to pay to stick the shovel in the ground and throw it on his property, and the act of doing that, and then also the material that's in the shovel. It's kind of a royalty. The reason, well, it's obvious why it's beneficial to our project, because we push a cost that benefits us to somebody else. But for Dennis to make his project work, he would have to import it from somewhere, which is pretty expensive. So we're able to provide that at just barely under what he would have to pay otherwise, and so it benefits both parties. The other part of the agreement with Mr. Cunningham and Active West is originally we are trying to serve, this project's trying to serve these commercial lots with sewer. They're currently on septic. And the original plan was, well, we'll just build a sewer line here and we'll drain it down to Northwest Boulevard, to that main, and off we go. Everybody's happy. The challenge there is we have some there's a grade problem. So we can serve maybe 3 of these parcels, but not these ones back here, and especially not the RV park, who really desires a sewer hookup right now. Not to mention the Active West property, that couldn't be served in the future either. So what we've changed course completely. So instead of draining to Northwest Boulevard, now we're going to drain the other way. We're going to build a sewer line. We'll start at the upper end here and come down La Crosse, and then it will cross or be within the Active West property in a future easement, and then tie in to the city's sewer interceptor, which heads right to the treatment plant.
Matt, just a quick question. Is that BLM land you're going across there, though?
This is BLM right here.
So do you have an easement to go across that?
That what I mentioned, we're working on one thing with
That's the
BLM.
one?
That's it right there, yes. So the city, the benefit to the city is we get to serve all of these parcels, right? The benefit to Active West, they get service, but the distinction is from this point all the way to the sewer interceptor is at Active West's cost. So it's a small savings to the city, but a big benefit to the city for sewer service. The other part of the excavation is, depending on the bids and depending on which alternates we're able to award, that will change how much material our site generates. So just like La Crosse generates material, this area generates material as well. The reason I'm separating them is because one of BLM's biggest concerns and requirements was you can't take any of our material and put it on some other parcel, okay? Anything that is scooped out of our property needs to be on our property somewhere else. And so we've honored that. So again, depending on what happens and which of these we're able to award, there will be some waste. It's not waste, but it's extra material that will be placed in this area. But the quantity will vary. Any questions on that whole thing?
What's the worst case quantity? Or the most, I guess?
The worst case, the most, we're at preliminary right now, so I think we're at probably another 5,000 yards right in there somewhere. And the reason that is imagine these big flat fields. You know, if you move them up or down a foot, it changes things quite a bit.
And is BLM okay with that excess material on their?
Yes, yes. Provided we're not dumping it just in a big pile, right? So we're gonna spread it out and make it mean something. From a money standpoint, I wonder if I can move this. So on the left is our overall project budget. So currently, Ignite has committed $1.8 million. Active West, that agreement right now, if signed, will be $170,000. In full disclosure, though, some of that, I'm going to go backwards one. Some of that is the sewer line that'll be on his property, which he would have had to do anyways. That's about $40,000. But $130,000 of it is funding that's just infused into our project. Then the balance of the sewer that isn't paid by Active West will be funded by the sewer department, which was confirmed today, and the balance, or the water line, which I failed to mention, my apologies. The water line will be funded by the water department, will extend from about here through La Crosse all the way to connect into an existing water line here. So we'll create some looping there, which makes Terry Pickle very happy. And then we'll provide a service into the site for the bathroom and irrigation, then probably another service for future whatever happens out here. And then finally, there's some stormwater funding that Chris is able to put towards the project. So when we go over to the costs, again, the base bid, that was the blue and orange area, the roadway and the parking lot, which we really want to award. We're pretty confident that we'll be able to award that. And this number has a 10 or 15% contingency even yet. So fairly confident we can award the base bid. Adult 1, we're still slightly under budget by about $10,000. And remember, Adult 1 was to grade the soccer fields. But once we get beyond that, we're slightly over budget. If bids come in right on the engineer's estimate, which they won't, and so we'll have a different conversation when we do open the bids. From a schedule standpoint, like I mentioned, the plans are under city review right now, the preliminary design. We're working, even while they're doing that review, we'll get those back soon with the intent to advertise at the end of April, beginning of May, with a summer construction, because I know there are some limitations on when this money needs to be spent. That is all I have. Happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Matt.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
Well,
So
let's see,
we're-
where does this include the signal, new signal that would go in at La
Yes, sir.
Crosse then?
Yes, it does. Includes the signal at Northwest Boulevard in La Crosse.
Okay.
Are you seeking grant funding for the remainder of the, or how are you guys planning on the additional costs for,
As far as the ad alternates?
yeah, the ad alternates?
Currently, we are at the funding limit that we think we'll get, at just under 2.2 million. That's where we're at now. If there's other opportunities, we're certainly open to them.
Do you have the cost for the ad alternates in finished form and not roughed-in form?
I do. I don't remember the soccer field, but surprisingly, the pickleball court, just to go from the pad, the dirt pad, to a finished product, which means all the concrete, all the fancy marks, and then the fencing around, and then some sidewalk around, was, landscape architect quoted me about $130,000, which is a lot. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you.
Matt?
So Matt, you'll be back to give us the final numbers when the bids are accepted?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Next up, Commissioner Chapkus for the parking report, please.
Thank you, Chairman Hoskins. Well, we're seeing traffic and parking demand pick up downtown almost across all parking lot locations. Here are some of the numbers. February saw McEwen sell 208 passes. Total revenue was $5,225, lower by $345 from last year. Pretty close. Independence Point sold 0 passes, same as last year at this time. The museum sold 3 passes in February, down 1 from last year, or $15 less in revenue. And Memorial Field sold no passes in February, same as last year. The permits sold for the unsecured parking garage in February were 263 permits sold for a total revenue of $3,945. The secured parking sold 19 passes for a total of $1,100. And we're down only $130 in total from last year, same period, which isn't bad. Some projects we're working on. The Parking Commission has been reviewing the previous Rich and Associates parking study completed in 2016 for ideas on developing uniformed pedestrian wayfinding signage and simple, easy-to-read parking wayfinding signage. We have received really great input from our commissioners and expect to see the final drafts shortly, allowing the city to begin producing and installing these around town and in the core, improving the experience of visitors and locals alike. And I'll bring further updates as warranted throughout the year. And that's all I've got.
Thanks, Jim. Any questions or comments for Bob Parker? Next up is the Executive Director Report. Take it away, Tony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First up is Coeur d'Alene Arts and Cultural Alliance Riverstone Park Canopy Project funding request. And I believe Ally is here to visit with the board on the revised funding request.
Hi. And
Hello.
Happy St. Patrick's Day. I don't have green, so I got my pen. I'm really excited to report that our GoFundMe effort has done really well. So we are still asking for $35,000 towards the Riverstone cover. And mostly that is because we don't know exactly what the cost is going to be. We have an estimate of $85,000, but Bill Greenwood has suggested that there may be some expenses that we're unaware of. And if you have questions that are specific to that, Kevin Jester is here to answer those. We feel really strongly that this project is really important for our community right now because with the pandemic, creating outdoor performance spaces for our community to enjoy is really critical to our livelihood. Any questions?
Ally, I saw in the paper where it said the life expectancy of the sales is about 6 to 7 years.
They said, well, the company that we are working with said that it could be 7 to 10 years. We expect that it will be probably more like 7. So when it's time to redo the sales, we do have a commitment from Idaho Central Credit Union for a 10-year naming rights. And if it came to the point where we had to replace the sales, we would probably retain some of the money that we've raised as a contingency for replacing those sales.
I was going to ask if there was any way to start saving, having some kind of a fund that you could put away money every time it's used to replace the sales in the future.
Absolutely.
Good idea.
No further questions? Thank you very much.
And I just wanted to say, Bill Greenwood was not able to be here today, but he did want me to convey that they fully support the program and plan on managing the project.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, this is an action item for the board if the board should so choose to take action on the request.
I move that we approve $35,000 for the purchase of the sales for the Riverstone Park.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Any discussion from our Zoom commissioners?
No, I'm good with it. I'm very, this is Sarah, sorry, Commissioner Garcia. I'm very pleased to see that Arts Alliance has come up with some companion funding to the Ignite funding, and I'm all for shading those poor musicians so they're not roasting to death in the sun.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, say no. Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman,
Chairman, next up, I'd like to invite Phil Boyd to visit with the board about Atlas project update and a couple other items that could be action items for the board.
While you're setting up,
I was just going to follow up on Mick's comment on this as far as a reserve for replacement. And I think that's something that as these districts close, as the Lake District closes, as the River District close, the agencies have built a lot of tremendous assets in these districts. And I would hope that at the time where those decisions are made and those districts close, that the city council look at reserve funds for making sure that there's ongoing funding for years in the future for when the Lake District closes, for McEwen maintenance and the parking garage maintenance and those things. So that's a challenge I'll put to future councils. So when the River District closes, that's something that should be put
put in the reserve
in
fund
the
to
reserve account.
maintain within that district.
Yeah. So I just wanted to add that.
Good idea.
Good.
Thank you, Chairman Hoskins and Commissioners. This is our monthly update, relatively short tonight, just one action, or two action items for your consideration. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Phase 1 infrastructure. Also, I'm going to talk about pit remediation related to the Phase 1 infrastructure. The Atlas Road raised intersections, which is an action item, and then the entry monuments. Not a lot to report on the Phase 1 infrastructure, other than the date, and I don't want you to cringe, might push, but through no fault of the contractor, because he is itching to get going with the weather. We are holding him up, meaning we'll just say collectively Ignite in the city for a couple of reasons. One, the river edge sewer that extends from the end of our project west through River's Edge. There's been some challenges with getting that under agreement to have it completed, and so it's slowed down some closings on Area 1 and 2, which in turn has impacted some of our ability to do infrastructure work. So that's one of the items that has slowed the contractor down. He wants to go do the work. We're holding him back because of some cascading issues it creates for further down the line. Area 8, which is out to RFP right now, interestingly, the board might remember that we had two different scenarios for that. One was single-family lots. The other scenario was front-loaded single-family lots. So the driveways came off the street into your home. The other scenario we had developed was alley-loaded lots. When we were platting areas 1, 2, 10, 12, 6, and 13, we had to make a decision. Are we going to put alley-loaded lots in, which I think, as you guys have maybe heard, are considered pretty progressive in Coeur d'Alene, even though we got a town full of them. But down in this area, we had some challenges with them, so it was elected to plat them as single-family front-loaded lots. RFP goes out, and one of the first questions we get is, hey, can we do them as alley-loaded lots from one of the potential proposal developers on the project? So talked it through with Tony, and we figured out a way to pause the construction in that area as well, to give the opportunities for the RFPs to come in, because we wanted to give the board the latitude, the selection committee and both the board the latitude to look at both the product that might go in there and the pricing for that product, because potentially the pricing for that product type could be higher than front-loaded single-family. So we've paused the construction in that area primarily related to power. And then Avista is just generally delayed. If you were to go out and look at the site now, you'll see trenches all over the place, and Avista is installing their conduits. Gas crews haven't been out there in quite a while, so it's just, they've got a lot of things going on their end. And so we're open and ready for them, but they just have not been able to get to the site. Once they're complete, we'll close in their trenches and be able to move forward with the rest of the infrastructure. The
You know
impact.
why they're not able to get to the site?
I think they have other obligations, because as you imagine, everybody's clamoring for Avista to come to their development and work on it. And so I think that the way that their scheduling has been rolling out. They've got a lot of the conduit infrastructure, and it's just gas that's catching up. The overall impact to the Ignite and the developers, we don't see a lot of impact if the date gets pushed out. There is a potential cost impact if we miss our paving window but we're not exactly certain of that. We're gonna try to hit the paving window really hard, because again, under the current market, everyone wants the paving companies to come and do their subdivision. So currently, La Riviere has a date on their dance card, and we're gonna work hard to maintain that date so it doesn't get pushed off further. Just got a couple of photos. We shot these in March, so there was still, March 1, so there was still snow on the ground, quite a bit of moisture in it. But you can see in here, it's starting to shape up where you see Atlas Road that comes off of the roundabout. Here's Area 8. This is Area 1. This is the alley here through Area 1 and Area 2. So you can see how it's starting to shape up in there. Currently, there isn't any work east of this that you can see, because we intend to probably borrow quite a bit of soil in this area. Photograph looking, here's the maintenance, parks maintenance and storage building, the restroom facility, and you can see the big, what will be great big green spaces in here. Quite a bit of water in this swale here because the ground's frozen. Another shot looking back to the east, and you can see how the grass is starting to peek through right there. And the water is so low, you can really get an eye of what the ADA swim launch looks like here. I've got another shot of it that I'll show you, but this is the years talk about the accessible route, the accessible picnic area, and if you come out of these accessible parking spaces down here, you've got a route right down to the water. Another shot looking back towards the south. And here's another good shot. You can see this is what is called Veneer Road. And then here's another road here in the alleys in Atlas Road. Last board meeting, I talked to the board about, and the board approved funding for a shared use path on Area 12, potentially as also on the River's Edge property. By doing that, we're able to put the diagonal parking spaces down in this area, which we're still headed and kind of working through that process. Hopefully it will come to fruition. This is a shot back at the shoreline here. You can see the rock wall. The water is quite low there. This is another shot. This is what we call the inlet, kind of a bigger beach area in here. The water, when it's at full pool or at summer pool, is kind of right in here. Another shot at the, we call this one the amphitheater, for obvious reason. This is the old launch. You guys have seen that before. And then there's the swim launch, which people use. I was down there the other day with the dogs, and it's interesting. People sit down here and just hang out this time of year in the sunshine on those transfer walls. Any questions on phase one before I move on? Okay. So pit 1 and 2 exploration, I've briefed the board on that before about getting out there, digging the big trenches across it, to try to get a better idea of what's in there. Pit 1 appears to be mostly unsuitable soil and sawdust, which was discouraging. We were hoping that there was going to be something in there. When I say unsuitable, primarily focusing on the structural nature of it. We can generate topsoil from it, but we don't need topsoil. We need structural soil. We can generate topsoil and sell it over a period of time, but we really wanted structural soil. Pit 2 appears to be 100% sawdust. And so currently we have La Riviere looking for an opportunity to resell it as hog fuel in the fall when the mills need it, or potentially landscape material. So that's one of the things that we'll work through that pricing, bring it back to the board once we kind of develop an overall cost structure with La Riviere. And I'm going to give you a kind of a pictorial overview of the current thinking, just so you guys are kind of aware. And if you have any feedback or thoughts for us, I can implement those. So the current thinking, what we plan to do, to get you guys your bearings, Celtis Way is up here. So this is kind of the gigantic Mount Hink pile right here. What we plan to do is level off Mount Hink, and in the process of leveling it off, evaluate if any of that material in there is suitable. So as we start pushing it around, we'll get an idea. If it's suitable, we'll start to segregate it and process it to generate structural soils and topsoil. So we'll level that all off. Once that's leveled off, we now have kind of a stockpile area set. Because as I've mentioned before, we're in for the long haul. When I say long haul, 2 or 3 or 4 years in the pit remediation business. So now we've got a stockpile site. Then we go and we excavate pit 1. So we'll round it off to 100,000 yards of material out of here. and we bring it over and stockpile it on our Mount Hink flat spot. As we bring it out of the hole, we're also classifying it and saying, terrible, never going to be able to use any of it, let's stack it over here. Not so bad, we'll be able to separate it into topsoil, maybe some structural soils, we'll separate it over here. All the while, we're getting a good idea of how much material can go back into Mount Hink. So we've processed it, pit one. We've figured out what is structural out of Mount Hink. We've figured out what's structural out of pit one, and now we have put that back into pit one. So we started with a 100,000 cubic yard hole, and maybe we put 20,000 yards back into that hole. So we're still 80,000 yards short. I need to get the 80,000 yards from somewhere. Well, this is the 80,000 yard location. The reason that information is so critical to analyze what I need, how much we're short, before we go design this is because obviously you can imagine the impact if we lower that whole site substantially. Removing the trees has always kind of been in the cards to do work in there, but exactly how we leave those. And the way to think about it, on the lots on the edge, if you envision a flat lot that doesn't require a daylight basement, that's if I only need 80,000 yards. If we need more than 80,000 yards, we're going to end up with a sloped lot that would require a daylight basement, which a daylight basement isn't the end of the world. We don't anticipate it affecting lot sales, but it's just one of the considerations I wanted the board to be aware of, that we may need that material. As we excavate this material, we'll put it into pit one, and then we'll stockpile probably for pit two. The thinking behind this kind of incremental approach is to never get ourselves too far extended financially, and that we're always producing resaleable land with the minimal amount of investment up front. So that's kind of the current plan of action on the pit remediation. Glad to answer any questions on that.
Bill, are all those trees gonna come up?
Yeah, probably most of them will.
Yeah.
Yeah, the ones on Celti's Way that are closest to Celti's Way, we're working to try to figure out how to save those if possible, but some of that again depends on how much site work we have to do through there. That's also why I want to wait to know exactly how much soil we need to remediate pit one. So if there are opportunities to save some of the trees through clever grading, we would do that. If the board remembers, there's a hill climb that kind of runs right through the site here, pedestrian access that runs from Celti's Way all the way down to the waterfront. Maybe there's some opportunities to save something in there. Or, I just don't want to get carried away with site grading until I really know what we need. Yeah, hit that one already. So the next action item for the board to consider is raised intersections or speed tables on Atlas Road. When we originally conceived of the project, we, and I'll say primarily Matt Gillis's group of transportation engineers, were worried about the speed of vehicles through here. And it was always been in the back of our mind, you know, you kind of have this at the concepting level, gosh, this kind of worries me a little bit about the speed of vehicles coming off of Celti's Way. They're at pretty good speed. They come through the roundabout, they slow down a little bit, but then they come down a pretty steep grade right here. It's about 7.5%. So you're coming down a relatively steep grade, you hit this corner, and then you get around the corner, you're like, sweet, a nice straight stretch. So you take off through the straight stretch. During the financial feasibility part of this, when we were crunching numbers and making sure it would work financially, we're of course pulling out things that are really nice to have and we think they're important, but you know, sometimes some things just have to be sacrificed. Well, the speed tables was one of them. As we got into the design level detail, Matt's group of transportation engineers got even more concerned, and they kept saying, this is worrisome, and of course they called Chris Bosley, talked to Chris about it, the city engineer, and he's also worried about it, just from a, you know, this is supposed to be a pedestrian focused neighborhood. So between our shop and Chris, we developed a priority of potential areas to put in raised intersections. So here at this intersection would be priority 1, priority 2 up here, and then 3 and 4. And I think you guys are all familiar with what raised intersections look like. This is the one that's at Suzanne. This is the prairie trail that moves through here. You're crossing Suzanne, headed into the park. And again, it's kind of the signal, what's going on here? Why is there color change? Why is there concrete suddenly? Why does it narrow? Dell's going to talk about the entry monuments right here, and the signal to the driver is slow down, especially here. This is another shot of Suzanne. This is a one down at U of I we did. Matt did this with the U of I and I think with Dell. And then, of course, you guys know the one out here. So you're familiar with them. The range of costs from here starts at 60,000, which would be priority one, to 167,000 if the board were to fund all of them. So the question in front of the board today is that something you want to pursue, implementing and funding? Because it's not in our current budget. Tony and I had this discussion that kind of anything that wasn't in our original conceptual budget, and you guys know the cash flow, we went over the cash flow with the finance committee last week, and anything that wasn't in that we're bringing forward, like the shared use path last month, that was never in the budget, so we brought it forward. This was never in the budget, so we're bringing it forward for the board's consideration. So I'll pause there, Chairman Hoskins.
Bill, I have a question. This is Brennan
Hi, Brennan.
in Zoom land. Are there any other traffic calming measures that, like, number one is that straightaway, so I see why that would be prioritized. Number two is steep, but just from cost savings, are there other alternatives besides the raised paths that would calm traffic?
The ones that we would typically employ, which are the vertical elements, so the landscaping elements at the intersections, we're employing those. So Del Hatch's landscape architecture at the intersections has some, the vertical elements, the trees, the landscaping, the shrubbery, which is again a signal to, hey, I'm somewhere that I probably shouldn't go fast. That's one of the elements that's already in the project. The other one that creates a little bit of friction is the diagonal parking along Atlas Road here. So again, as you're driving through there, you may not consciously do it, but you start thinking, wait a second, are those cars going to back out on me? So you'll slow down a little bit through there. Those things don't start, obviously, until this number two, which is one of the reasons, this is in the priority list to put a speed table there. It's also a pretty easy one to put a speed table. If you look at the cost, it's one of the lower cost ones to put it there because there's not much additional infrastructure we need to put there. But those are the current ones, Brennan, that are there now.
So there are some already. These
Yes.
would be additional.
Yes.
So we did meet with Phil as a finance committee last week and had a pretty exhaustive discussion about where cash flow will look based upon lot sales and current bids and current allocations already. And should we choose, we do have the ability to fund this at the 167,000, 168,000 range for all four of the tables, should we choose to do that.
Yeah, and I'd like to add that the cash flow is pretty conservative. So these infrastructure needs that are just kind of, these unforeseen infrastructure needs, because at first I feel like every time I'm like, do you see anything else that we have to add? So that was a concern going into it, but after seeing how the cash flow is working out, I think we feel pretty comfortable with where we're at with the cash flows right now. But I do have a question as far as priorities 1 and 2. It seems to me that 2 would be more of a priority than 1, just because of people coming off of Celtice and coming in faster, and then the diagonal parking creates another safety issue. But just a thought.
Yeah, and I think, and I might be able to pinch hit. Chris or Matt might need to come up and provide additional details. I think the thinking on this one was, this is a primary pedestrian crossing here. So the people that are coming out of this part of the neighborhood are going to wander down through here and land at the inlet. And so I think the cross traffic in that area was the thinking. Did I get that? Chris is shaking his head that I got that right. So I can pretend to be a transportation person on occasion too, as long as I'm briefed well.
I guess it's a moot point if we decided to fund all 4 anyways, but just saying.
Well, I would make a motion that we do approve the funding for the 4 speed tables.
I second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, at this point, I will turn it over to Del. Unless there's any more questions for you, Chairman Hoskins.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Afternoon.
Bill, howdy.
Nice to see all you folks again.
Welcome.
The last time I was here, I believe, was in January, and I had presented what we were referring to as a hybrid type of plan that tended to meld into our signage concept, some of the things you liked from the first alternate I showed you, and then some from the second alternate. So I'm going to move through these, again reminding you of where they occur. Up here on Atlas at the roundabout is the major signage to the project. We have signage over here at Suzanne. Up here off of Heartwood, it's considered our a lesser or secondary signage entry. And then I have one here at the intersection that Phil was just describing. In fact, we're showing them street signs at each of the intersections. I referred to this park sign, which is going down by the restroom shelter, talked about some of the elements, the vertical elements, the curved top to the sign itself, the font style that we're using, and we talked about incorporating that into this signage package as well. I'll ask you to, for tonight at least, to ignore the colors that are shown here because we're not at a color choosing spot yet, but this was the presentation that we reviewed in January, showing primarily concrete columns, adding a river rock base, these elements up above just to carry the weight, and the spans, as we're talking to our structural engineers, are becoming steel members. We talked about having posts and decorative fence that would at least, flanking these sign elements, would at least back and buffer traffic noise and things like that. This sign is at the roundabout, primarily on the east side of Atlas. This one would be a smaller component on the west side, also at Atlas. This is at Heartwood. If you'll see this element, both of these elements, in fact, are essentially that element. So this one's scaled down in both height and width, obviously, from the first one. This was the concept at Suzanne, and the thinking, again, behind this one was that we're using all of the same components. Obviously, this one's up in the air. We're getting it up above walkers or bikers and such. And we're trying to move it back away from the road surface so that as people are either moving on the trail or walking on the sidewalks, that the people in vehicles can see them a little bit better. This was one of the concepts that we were thinking of as a street sign. It has adapted a little bit from this, and I'll explain it to you here in just a minute. So that was just a quick update. So where we're at, we're producing we're probably at least at 50 or 60% right now in developing these as construction details. And as you can see, they're following those concept drawings fairly closely. River rock on the base, concrete columns on either side with this large member across carrying the sign, the logo that we've talked about, and then the lettering. That's the front elevation facing the roundabout. Here's the side elevation if you were viewing it in this direction. And then looking down from the top, gets a little complicated here. This member is actually supported by these two and these two in sort of a cross situation. What we're looking at here
And I just had a discussion with an electrical engineer today about how we can make this sign internally lit. There are inherent problems with using ground-mounted uplights and things, primarily moisture and, excuse me, covered up with debris or snow and things like that. So we want the sign to be lit. We're looking at having this element of the sign internally lit. If any of you have noticed the sign moving into Sandpoint, just as you cross the long bridge, this is a similar type of sign. I believe this is Corten steel, which is one of the materials we've talked about a little bit. It's either been laser or hydrojet cut to incorporate their logo of the city. This is a blue polycarbonate backing behind it. And when internally lit, it glows at night, and this becomes a silhouette, but also easily discernible during the daylight hours. That's the concept that we're looking at here. They would be internal LED lights. Any questions before I move on a little bit? Just to let you know, we took the dimensioning and off of that earlier one just to make it a little bit more clear, but we've actually got these things proportioned, dimensioned, et cetera, and all of them are being vetted with our structural engineer right now. The details don't incorporate the rebar and stuff like that at this point, but obviously lots of rebar in these areas here and in through this wall that you see here. We're also in some pretty detailed discussions about what those actual connections look like, how they're achieved primarily through bolt connections on top, et cetera. Right now we're envisioning that this entire element with the two cross pieces there and the two cross pieces there would actually all be set in one piece. Obviously needs something like a crane to do something like that. The span, just to give you an idea of proportion, the span is about 21 plus feet from here to here. The height from the very top is close to that 9.5 to 10 foot height. So as I move through these others, realize that they also have been dimensioned out and such. We're just not showing that right now. This is the smaller element that would be on the west side of the roundabout. Almost all similar construction through there, scaled down slightly, but otherwise detailed pretty much the same, this being more of a cantilevered setup. Here's the one at Suzanne. This one's coming along, but I can tell you that we're still playing a little bit with this width. It feels a little bit squatty and broad to us. We're looking right now at narrowing this angle a little bit, maybe narrowing that base up. Those are conversations, again, we're having with our structural engineer. What he's also suggesting is that rather than trying to cantilever this all the way over, is that there may actually be an internal steel post there that would go all the way down into the footing. Side view, top view. Again, we're hoping that these signs as well could be essentially a boxed metal, in these cases, viewed from both sides. And on the big one, only viewed from the Atlas and the roundabout side. But these would be viewed from both sides, again, internally lit. And again, at a height that is not going to interfere with bikers or walkers or things like that. This element is much taller, actually, than our main large sign at the roundabout. This one is closer in height at the very top to 14 feet. Here is how the street sign has evolved. And one of the reasons it's evolved, in visiting with Jack Griffing at Welch Comer, I know Jack's had some discussions with Chris. We will have the standard Coeur d'Alene street signs at the intersections. That's the code, and that's what would be installed. But we're also looking at placing these as more of a decorative sort of project street sign at each of the intersections. Not necessarily on each corner of the intersections. In fact, if I can, I'll back up here real quick. For instance, we have these intersections that dead into Atlas, with the exception of this one at this point. We're looking at possibly setting those street signs on the opposite side of the street. So as you're, let's say as you're driving in this direction down Atlas, as you're approaching it, you would see that street sign indicating Kiln Road at that point. But it would be on your right-hand side or your travel side of that road. On the opposite side, we would have the standard Coeur d'Alene street signs. And it would be the same here, looking at the same here, and at that location. So at each of those dead ends, they would be on the T-bone side, let's call it, of the intersection. On these, where they eventually are planned to move through, and on this intersection, we've actually got them placed on one corner of that intersection. Oops. So the other thing that we're looking at doing, I mentioned, and in the sketch, it's a little bit different in the concept sketches, flanking these entry monuments, we'll call them. We had suggested that there would be a certain distance of these screen panels that would draw you in to these entryways. What we're looking at now are, for both efficiency and what we think are durability, we're looking at the posts to actually be concrete, board formed and then stained so that they actually can appear as wood. And then the panels themselves would be a decorative metal cutout that could be powder coated to match the rest of the theme, to complement the rest of the signs. So not solid, and in fact, somewhat transparent, but enough there that it sort of blocks visually and buffers visually both the property development that might be on the development side of the sign and from that property sort of visually buffer the traffic side. You can see that the one we're considering now actually almost kind of picks up on that river rock cobble look that is integrated into the base of each of these signs. I think that's it. What questions can I answer for you and tell you where we're going from here, et cetera?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. This may not, I don't think this is for Dale, this might be for Tony, but who pays for the long-term maintenance of all the monument signing and all the other signing? Is that part of the homeowner association?
It's going to be the master association.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
Looking good.
Okay, thank you.
Dale?
Thank you, Dale.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman, for my report.
It's an action item for what?
Well, it was listed as an action item in case something came up that needed board action, so it was,
Okay. Carry on. Any actions there that we think we need to take, other than Dale and team to continue? All right. That wraps up the executive director's report.
yes, sir.
Next up is the board commissioner comments. Any board commissioner wishing to provide some words of wisdom? From our Zoom friends.
No wisdom from me.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Okay.
Thanks, Brendan and Sarah.